If it's about love, if it's about love.
Hey, what's up everybody? This is Austin Haynes with the Waking Justice Project, and this is your daily wake-up call. Here's what the Corporatocracy is up to today, November 7th, 2019. You can visit our website at wakingjustice.org for more details. Here are the headlines. Today, we're going to deconstruct the old saying that, quote, Washington, D.C. is just Hollywood for ugly people. We'll look at how Washington and Hollywood collaborate to promote the political theater of the US-led corporatocracy. And finally, we'll ask, what's the real truth behind all that propaganda? So a few years back, indie journos Matthew Alford and Tom Secker published a groundbreaking book titled National Security Cinema: The Shocking New Evidence of Government Control in Hollywood. In their book, Matthew and Tom present evidence that the CIA and US Department of Defense, or DOD, are heavily involved in script development on Hollywood movies. You may not be surprised to learn this, but the authors dug deep in their research and discovered that the CIA and DOD are, quote, about 10 times more involved in Hollywood cinema than previous studies have revealed. In an interview with indie journo Slava Zilber, Matthew explains that he and co-author Tom were about to acquire several thousand pages of documentation through the Freedom of Information Act that revealed how the Pentagon and CIA have written hundreds of films, including major blockbuster films such as The Terminator, Avatar, Iron Man, the Marvel series, and other major franchise series. Matthew says, if you're interested in their research and you don't have £5 to buy their book, you can check out the website spyculture.com, where co-author Tom Secker examines some of the films in depth to show how the CIA and DOD force specific narratives in each film to serve the agenda of the corporatocracy. For example, last week, Amazon.com just released the second season of its popular spy series, Jack Ryan. Tom says, we know from interviews with the showrunners, Carlton Cuse and Graham Rowland, that the CIA reviewed the scripts for the series. And it's worth noting here that Amazon is a major CIA contractor. As Tom points out, the second season focuses on a hotly contested political struggle in Venezuela between two opposing politicians. He says the two politicians are obvious stand-ins for Maduro and Guaido. Do those names sound familiar? You may remember, we recently reported on the actual failed coup in Venezuela earlier this year. The US corporatocracy has tried to destabilize democratically elected President Maduro and replace him with Juan Guaido, handpicked by the CIA to be a puppet for US corporate interests. The new season of Jack Ryan clearly sets out to demonize real-life Venezuelan President Maduro. The season trailer opens with Ryan asking, "What's the most major threat on the world stage?" Venezuela is the single greatest resource of oil on the planet, so why is this country in the midst of one of the greatest humanitarian crises in history? Of course, there's no admission of the fact that real-life Venezuela has been under crushing economic sanctions by the US for years. The US has blocked shipments of insulin, dialysis machines, and cancer and HIV medication, including those Venezuela had already paid for. In a recent report by the Center for Economic Policy Research, leading economists estimate that the US sanctions caused the deaths of 40,000 Venezuelans over a 15-month period. The point here, of course, is that there is indeed a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, but it's being deliberately caused by the US corporatocracy. The Jack Ryan character doesn't mention that fact, but implies it's the fault of the current President Maduro. As indie journo Margaret Kimberly wrote in the Black Agenda report, Venezuela is the victim of US aggression in reality, and now on the screen. Margaret says the perversion of truth is so prevalent in the United States. U.S. imperialism is quite bipartisan, and liberal Hollywood never saw imperialist propaganda it didn't want to hype. She says Americans are loath to think of themselves as being propagandized. The idea is inconsistent with notions of exceptional goodness and superiority that are constantly evoked in this country. But the propaganda of the US corporatocracy is bolstered by the corporate media, and that includes the entertainment industry. As Truthdig, Mint Press News, and other indie journos have reported, the truth about why the corporatocracy wants regime change in Venezuela has nothing to do with the humanitarian crises there. It's all about the oil. Back on September 25th, we reported on how regime change wars for oil profit the big banks of the US-led corporatocracy. It's all about forcing nations to buy and sell oil in US dollars. It's called the petrodollar system, and it creates an international demand for US currency, which creates a lender's market for big banks. Ironically, the US petrodollar system was first created in the early 1970s by President Richard Nixon in a secretive deal with Saudi Arabia. The twisted, bitter irony is that Saudi Arabia is now in a border war with Yemen. The Saudis are backed by US military and equipped by US armaments. And according to the UN, it's the US-backed war in Yemen that has created the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet. Not Venezuela, but based on the latest propaganda from Hollywood, the US corporatocracy still has its sights set on all that Venezuelan oil. For the past 2 decades, the US corporatocracy has escalated its pursuits of profit and power. As Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Chris Hedges recently wrote, the ruling elites and the corporations they serve cannot be reformed. Power has to be transferred into our hands. And since the elites won't give up power willingly, we will have to take it through nonviolent action. And the only real power we citizens have in this corporate plutocracy is mass organized boycott. If you want to learn how all of us in the work of global justice can join together in strategic boycott and force this corporatocracy to the people's bargaining table to end all this oppression, warmongering, and corruption, and to save our planet, please check out our About page and listen to our first podcast. And if you want to get involved, please fill out the Join Us form at the top right of the page. We'd love to hear from you. We're running out of time, y'all. Join us. Peace.
You must be involved in the struggle for freedom and justice.
If it's my love, if it's my
Justice is waking, justice is rising. Justice is waking, justice is rising.
If it's my
Justice
love,
is waking, justice is rising. It ain't just us, it's all of
If
us.
it's
Justice is waking, justice is rising. And it ain't just us, it's all of us.
if it's my
May every soul unite, tend the fire and let old coals relight. I'm a citizen of the world and we fight for the rights of everybody to live a truly free life. Red or yellow, black or white, left or right, gay or straight, human or animal, all life. Cause what matters is what is in common. If you know it, stand tall and keep dropping the knowledge.
Justice is waking, justice is rising. And it ain't just us, it's all of us.
if it's my love.